And we're ready to start when you're ready, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Hello, everybody. Call the meeting to order. And let's recognize a moment of silence. Thank you. Can we entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 23rd?
So moved.
A motion, a movement, and do we have a second?
Come on, y'all.
Come on. We got
Second.
a quorum out there. Where's the rest of the committee members?
Second.
Councilmember Bowden. Thank you, Councilmember Bowden. All in favor of those minutes, would you please say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I'd like to ask we've got a number of discussions, and I'd like to request to move some of the actionable items above the discussion. With discussions are down in items F, but some of the actionable items where we need to vote on would actually be in G. So I'd like to, if it's okay, if we can do it by acclamation, move item G and some of the discussion after we move on to actionable items. Any comments from any committee members?
Sounds like a good idea.
All right, great. Acceptance and dedication of rights of way, Mr. O'Brien.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. What this is another one of our authorizations to give DOT notice that we will accept maintenance of those items. The project at 518 East Bay Street. It's one of our standard letters.
I got you. Okay. We have a motion for approval out there. Or a motion, I should say.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Appel. Any more discussion on that rights of way? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item E, we got a lot of.
Yes, sir. We
Give us
had
a break on these temporary encroachments.
we had a pretty busy month. As you can see, a lot of that is irrigation. We also have some awnings and some different things, but all of them have been properly inspected and recommended for approval, and we just give them to the committee as information.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Now we're gonna skip and go to item G and then swing back to some of the discussions. Update on Spring Fishburne project, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask you if you would mind actually if we brought item 9 in.
Well, let's do that.
Beginning of G. That's we have Mr. Wes Wilson here with the Army Corps of Engineers. As hoping to.
By all means, let's do that with the pleasure of the committee, of course. Let's go to item 9, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So item 9 is the MUSC pump station upfit agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers through the Department of Army. Basically, this is to recommend approving a collaborative funding agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers, where they contribute $3 million in federal funding towards the upfit of that pump station, and the city contributes $1 million of funding. I can go into this in a little bit more detail, but this would be the city contributing in-kind services for design, and then any remaining contribution towards the construction project, and the Army Corps of Engineers basically contributing the construction of that pump station outfit. And let me just share very briefly, Mr. Chairman, as a reminder, which pump station we're talking about. This is the MUSC pump station over off of Courtney Drive, near Ralph H. Johnson Street. Just a sense of what this pump station does. On the left, we can see the flooding basically that would occur with no pump station on Courtney, which obviously is a main corridor through the medical district and extending out into Dowdy. You can see on the right, when we have a functional pump station, that corridor stays dry. And this is on a 10-year storm. So it's not a massive hurricane, but basically just a large rainstorm. So what we're proposing in this agreement is, again, a collaborative project with the engineers, 75-25 cost split, city leading the design process, and then the Army Corps leading the contractor construction project. And as I mentioned, Mr. Wilson is here if there are any questions for the Army Corps of Engineers as well.
Mr. Wilson, number one, thank you for being here. Thank you for your collaboration. I can tell you every time you come with a 3-to-1 funding situation, we're going to put you number one on the agenda. Okay. Any comments? Mr. Wilson? Somehow we can't hear you. At least I can't.
I can't hear either.
Your audio is connected and you're not on mute, so you may need to turn your audio up on your end.
No, still can't hear you.
I think we're okay.
Yeah, okay. So Mr. Fountain's gonna take care of it. But anyway, thanks for being on and making the attempt. Any questions of Mr. Fountain on this upgrade to the pump station? Well, let me ask that. Is it an upgrade or is it going to have the same capability it had prior?
Yes, that's a very good question, Mr. Chairman. So this pump station was put in originally by MUSC and then taken over by the city for operation and maintenance a little over about 10 to 12 years ago. The pump station is starting to near the end of its service life, similar to Concord, but not quite as far into the service life as Concord. What we're looking to do is basically upfit it to ensure continued service, but two, as you mentioned, to try to bring a little bit of a better level of service for these increasing storm sizes that we've been seeing and the increasing flooding in that area of the what's both the Spring and Fishburne drainage basin, as well as now the basin served by the pump station. So we'll be looking to basically enhance the existing pump station, do a little bit more than it does now, and continue it for another 20 years of successful service.
All right, good. Any questions from committee members? Hearing none, what's the pleasure? The motion?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Fountain, would you like to go to number 8 next?
I think we can return to our regularly scheduled program.
Since we're talking about upgrade. Okay, Spring Fishburne, Mr. Fountain, G1.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an update on the Spring Fishburne project as we're achieving some milestones. We wanted to keep the committee up to date on what is obviously a very large investment for the city and the State Infrastructure Bank. So this is the current state of the Spring Fishburne project. Basically, we are now bringing the surface collection system into connection with that deep tunnel and outfall that have been completed into the marsh. So what are 90% of the surface connections have now been activated, so are connected into the tunnel and are flowing out through gravity through that outfall system.
Wow,
So that includes basically what you're seeing on the figure in the yellow highlight and in the green highlight. All of those systems are directly connected into the Spring Fishburne project now. Many of those are obviously some of the most flooded areas of the city, which is why the project originated. Everything from the Septimus Clark corridor in yellow to President Street, running north-south here with the cross streets of Bogard, Spring, Fishburne, our other North Range streets at Ashley Avenue, Rutledge Avenue, Shepherd Street. And then the surrounding streets tie into those green sections as well. So everything in red will now be seeing some level of drainage improvement on the project. The only area that we're still working to tie in is the Cherry Street and B Street section here at the bottom of the project. That's our last, the crews will be out there again tomorrow, working on the connections, basically as they plug areas to avoid tidal inflow to the project and then connect the surface drainage after those tidal plugs are made. So we expect that to be, barring any additional strange weather, we expect those to be working likely by the end of February as well, and have, again, gravity flow for the system online. There'll be another significant improvement once we have the pumps installed in phase 5. But there is depending on how high the tide comes, still a very significant improvement in how quickly things will drain, even just from this gravity component during those low tide cycles, especially.
So hypothetically, we get a rain bomb on low tide. These areas won't flood like they do now.
You'll see them at least drain much faster, that you won't see that standing flood water anymore. The water will actively be coming down as soon as that rain starts to abate, rather than having, a day or two of standing water. You might have, and it depends on how big the storm is and how intense, but you might have an hour of standing water or something along those lines. So much improved.
Yeah, that's a big victory.
Absolutely.
Any questions from committee members? That's a wonderful update. That's great.
I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman, but I'll just say hallelujah.
I'm right there with you, man. I'm about to do a praise dance. What are you talking about? No more comments? All right,
Well,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I just some things that happen to you when you're in council chambers, and Councilmember Moody had brought this up. And it was like, "Hello, Houston, we have a problem."
Yeah.
That he brought up, and we were so far behind on this project, and behind on different levels on the construction part, the improvement part, the financing part. I mean, it was like, oh dear God, where are we with this thing, and how bad is it? And so over, I guess it's been 5 years now, hasn't it? I mean, we've trudged through.
Oh, at least that, yeah.
Yeah, we trudged through a good portion of this. So, amen. Right? I think we can just say amen.
Yeah, highest compliments, Mr. Fountain, to you and your team and everybody involved with this one.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mitt.
If I may, I'm sorry, I was offline just a few minutes ago when y'all talked about the MUSC pump station, and I wanted to thank Wes and our partners at the Corps of Engineers.
Right.
This funding for, I know a lot of times they do the engineering, right? But in this case, the funding for this drainage improvement would not be there, but for our partnership with the Corps of Engineers. They really did a terrific job, not just helping think about the engineering, but how to get this done and to utilize a congressional authorization that had in fact been sitting out there for a while. So my kudos off to our partners at the Corps, and then back to this one, and many people involved, but Steve Kirk deserves a gold star on this.
I agree.
And this is just like almost like a career project for him, right?
He's been living it. That's true.
He's been incredible on this project. Lots of other people have too. I get it, but Steve Kirk has really been amazing.
Thank you for those observations and recognition, because they definitely well deserved.
Yes, sir.
Nicole, as well as, we've all seen how excited Steve gets to talk about this one. So, thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. Update on Glen McConnell Parkway drainage pipe project, Mr. Fountain.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Glen McConnell pipe project, as you all may recall, was where we were looking based on, I'll pull up a snapshot of kind of where we've been on this one as well. Based on some recommendations that were made by Weston and Sampson back in 2017 in the Church Creek analysis, looking at trying to reconnect Lake Dotterer under Glen McConnell to the Long Branch Creek system to try to relieve some of the flooding in Lake Dotterer, as well as potentially some of the flooding in Long Branch Creek. We basically worked through some additional modeling work with Weston Sampson, showed there wouldn't be as much direct benefit to the Church Creek Basin, but there would be significant benefit to that Lake Dotterer Basin and potentially the Long Branch Creek Basin. Partnered with the county, Charleston County, who is doing the Glen McConnell widening project, to see what could we do to try to put those two projects together. You'll probably recall that we did get an unfortunate decision from the Department of Revenue at the state saying that the sales tax dollars were not eligible for that project. However, County Council did step forward through some, I think, good negotiating between our council members and our mayor and their county council, and come up with ARPA funding to put toward some of the project work. So we did advance working through design and permitting, finished our construction drawings with our consultant, Weston Sampson. And we've been working through the environmental permitting on that project now for a couple of years. Unfortunately, based on the time frame the county has for when that construction needs to occur, to not disrupt the widening project, we are not going to be able to finish with our consultant the environmental permitting necessary to install the pipe system before they have to be able to basically pull the trigger on that phase of the project, not hold up the widening project. So we've been working with the county and looking at different options, and we wanted to bring back to the committee what our recommendation would be at a staff level, which would be to notify the county that we are not going to install the jack and board pipes, which is jack and boring is a trenchless technology where you basically dig under the road and literally jack the pipes through the roadway as you're working. That we will break that out into a separate contract in the future, but we would like them to perform the utility relocations as part of their project, assuming that we can come into a reasonable agreement with the contractor that were in that bid item, because those utility relocations do require opening up the road, opening up the asphalt, disrupting traffic. And it's one thing to do that as part of the Glenn McConnell project where they're doing all those things anyway. We would like to avoid, finishing that project and then immediately coming back a year later and reopening the road. I would expect, obviously we'll have to have the discussions with their contractor, but the way the line item bids are broken out, it shouldn't be too disruptive to do that. That's still $300,000 or $400,000 worth of work, as there's some 12-inch water mains that have to be moved, some electrical lines. I think the county tentatively has expressed interest in still doing the 50-50 match on that work and then reserving their other money for a future jack and board contract. The advantage is if we go that route, basically the pipe installation has no intrinsic connection to the road work. It's a separate standalone contractor that will do the install. So there isn't much difference doing it as part of their project versus doing a standard project. It's always easier to combine projects from a management perspective, which was the intent originally, but this actually, the one benefit we have of the county using ARPA funding rather than sales tax funding is that it doesn't have to be part of the sales tax project because it's no longer tied to that funding stream. So that's our recommendation at this point. Wanted to make sure that was something the committee was comfortable with before we reach out to the county and make that as a formal request, and then we'll bring back to council if there is an approval what the exact dollar amounts will be.
Okay, Councilmember Bowden, I see your hand.
Thank you, and thank you so much for that explanation. Pretty much as always, that's going to sound a lot better than when I try to digest it and explain it later. But just to be clear, so this will not require a second disruption of Glenn McConnell Parkway to go back and do the pipe work later.
So engineers hate comments exactly like that, Councilman Bowden, similar to probably attorneys. There will certainly be some level of disruption to bring in a construction equipment and set remove guardrail and set alternative guardrail treatments for protecting the workers. There will not be an extended lane closure or road impacts while you're digging trenches through the road and taking up those utilities. So it's a much, 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 much less impactful traffic disruption. It's more a normal out of the right of way construction where you have construction vehicles coming in and out and crews coming in and out rather than working in the road and having closed the whole road.
Okay, so functionally it achieves that objective.
Yes.
And then since Councilmember Shealy's expect that he would want us to make sure that the money that the city has allocated and the money that the county has allocated, these are all still in place to go forward with this work when the time is right, I guess, when everything's in place.
So I suspect that the mayor will want to chime in a little bit on that, Councilman Bowden, with the funding. But my understanding is that the county has said, yes, they are continuing to be committed to the project. And with that ARPA funding, they have more flexibility than they would have with a sales tax funding.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, to that point, I just thought I would confirm, I had a conversation with Chairman Sass about this and let him know that we may have to, do the project or most of the project separately rather than as part of their project. And regarding the funding, he saw no reason from his point of view as to what, there'd be no change in the county's commitment to what they had already committed to already, even though it might happen as a separate project. Thank you.
Okay.
And
Councilman
sorry,
Bowden?
Mr. Mayor, so our end is still good to go as well.
What was that? I'm sorry.
He's asking about our funding staying committed.
There was, just from my recollection, there was what the county was going to kick in, and then we kicked in a certain amount as well. So I just want to make sure that you mentioned the county's part. So our part, that's good to go as well.
Yeah, no, our money was dedicated and
Right.
Funded, and Chairman Sass says they're good to their commitment as well. So could the project cost change a little bit, I guess, by splitting it up? Maybe it goes up slightly, Matt, but I don't think it would be anything that we shouldn't be able to handle.
Yeah,
Our funding is committed. We haven't proposed any modifications to that allocated funding. That's correct.
Right.
Gotcha. Thanks, Joe. Just wanted to ask since Councilmember Shealy wasn't here, and I figured he might be interested in that.
Right. Yeah, Mr. Fountain, we probably want to circle back with Councilmember Shealy probably on tomorrow on that.
Absolutely.
Any final questions on this update? The doo-wop number 3, G3, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have a couple of graphics depending on the exact area you might want to focus on for the update, or I can give you a general update of where we stand overall on the project.
I guess a general update plus the idea, I think you had at least some discussion on some of the water that's coming underneath Savannah into this drainage basin and having to circle through twice to get out. Come in and then back out.
Yeah.
Keeping some of that water out of that, keeping it on the Stono side. We had that discussion.
Yes, absolutely. So just as a quick general update, DuPont Wapu, we're continuing to work through the project. We do have draft kind of concept preliminary engineering drawings that we've been using to work through easement acquisition. Most of you are probably familiar with the Epic Center shifting control of the ownership group from what was previously a minor funding party into now the controlling party.
Right.
We've met with them and they're basically saying they're indicating a similar path forward. They would still like to dedicate those easements and be part of this project. They're just trying to, I think, digest their acquisition. Expect to get back with us in the next month or two to hopefully finalize some of those easement decisions. We continue to work on the southern end of the property along Highway 17 with some of the larger property owners through the drainage system in that area for easement acquisition. There's certainly a number of developments proposed on some of those projects. We're coordinating with the county and with the design engineers who are developing those projects. And then as Councilman Waring mentioned, there is to the south, and let me perhaps start off with a slightly different graphic than I was going to. There is to the south, basically the neighborhood of Air Harbor and Citadel Woods. If you're familiar with those, you come down Stinson Drive to the south side of the Greenway. And basically that neighborhood, let me share my screen. That neighborhood here we go. Culver Avenue, Cessna, the Wildwood Townhomes. Turn on my aerial. basically flow through some of that neighborhood to the north, especially flows through this pond underneath the Wildwood townhomes and kind of up through this green space back here, through the Ruby Tuesdays parking lot, across Highway 17, and then into the drainage system that eventually flows across Sam Rittenberg, up through Citadel Mall, across 526, down behind Costco, back across Highway 17, back under the Greenway, and then out past Orange Grove elementary and middle schools into the marsh. So as Councilman
We're
Waring
getting dizzy
mentioned-
watching you flip through all of that.
Yeah, as Councilman Waring mentioned, it's not the most effective drainage design. I'm sure there was a reason for it at some point. It's now quite difficult for the water to successfully make that pathway. We have done quite a bit of work in collaboration with the county over the last couple of years in rehabilitating some of the pipes and drainage system that are under the townhomes here, which are individually owned townhomes in a community. Improving some of the ditching and drainage systems to reconnect it into the parcels that are in the back here, the Home 2 Suites and Ruby Tuesdays, and to at least be able to have it get out and get into this doo-wop drainage system, where before, many of you are probably familiar with, it would really get trapped in here and basically just spill back and start flooding out Air Harbor, in addition to the water in Air Harbor that has a trouble getting out and into its own drainage system, causing really some pretty deep, difficult flooding in this neighborhood and in these townhomes and the townhome properties. So we've come back and done quite a bit of again drainage rehab work. The city owns a piece of old right-of-way actually that comes through here. It looks like old rail line right-of-way.
Right.
And we've been now looking. Let me stop this share now that we hopefully have a sense of where we are and switch to the figure I was going to share, which is much more confusing, but I think more helpful. It's where those two things can go together. So this figure here, that the townhomes, sorry. The townhomes are on the bottom side of the figure.
That's medical U. That's medical U you got.
It should be switching. Hopefully it's switching. Did it jump to DuPont Wapu drainage?
No, it's still got MUSC pump station upfit.
It's not helpful. My screen jumped wonderfully.
Is anybody else saying MUSC pump station upfit?
try.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing. There you go.
Oh, now it is. Okay, good then.
There we go.
Is that any better?
Right.
No. I'm just going to stay on this screen, even though it's harder to read it. When I go to presentation mode, it's kicking it back.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. So the townhomes are on the bottom side. Again, we've improved that drainage. You can see this old rail line right of way that runs through. We've been working on this with the county, trying to basically open that back up and be able to hold more water on city property instead of in all of the residential properties.
Right.
Now, as you mentioned, Councilman Waring, what we've been working with the county, and the county is taking the lead on this part of it, is they've hired a consultant to look at bringing the water down the city right of way, tying it back into the Greenway here, and then coming west down the Greenway to where the Greenway meets the marsh instead of
Right.
into the DuPont Wapu system, which is already overloaded. So
Right.
this is a quicker route out, but does involve more design and construction work to figure out with that grade, how deep do the ditches need to be? Do we have to switch to pipes along that section of the Greenway? And as we all know, the Greenway is not, in fact, the city's property. We use
Right.
the purpose of it from CWS, then there's coordination with CWS
Right.
on how we fit that infrastructure into their system. So that is in design now at the counties, with the county, I think they hired Weston Sampson actually on that section.
Mm.
Look at that system. The city is continuing to do work in the area. We actually just installed the townhome neighborhood, granted some drainage easements to us, and we actually went out and dug out some swales and additional storage in here. We just went back and removed some more of the kind of scrub trees through this area and dug out some more storage, and we're looking at doing additional storage beyond that. This section was actually funded as a city small project that would run from fiscal year, let's see, last year we started it, and then continuing this year and into next year is how the funding is recommended for spread. So last year we did a lot of that heavy rehabilitation. This year we've done some tree removal and a little bit of additional excavation work, and the county starting their look. And then next year we'll be looking to likely dig out more of the high area that was the old rail bed and potentially store that water in the hope of providing that new outfall out with the county once we have a sense of what the county is going to do. So a lot of work going on in this area. It is one of the relatively heavily flooded residential neighborhoods that we deal with. So it's still in a small project stage because there's a lot we can do even at this level, and it's much quicker. But the county is starting to look at that potentially bigger capital project of redirecting that water like 1,000 feet down the Greenway from here.
All right, good. Any questions from committee members? Councilmember Shea.
Matt, as you were going through all that with your arrows and showing us the other map, how many or how much, if you can tell us, or percentage wise, how much of this is within the county, not the city, of all of us?
Yeah, that's a good question, Councilman Shade. So the townhome complex is in the city. Most of the commercial properties are in the city. And then in Air Harbor, well, Citadel Woods, which is the neighborhood immediately south of here, is completely within the city. And then Air Harbor, which is just south of Citadel Woods, that's more like probably, I have to run the exact numbers, but I would guess like 40% city, 30% city in the remainder county. So the county is chipping in because of that heavy contribution of Air Harbor. But the city has been working in it because of the Wildwood townhomes, the commercial properties, and the Citadel Woods community.
And this project is having a impact on the redevelopment or revitalization of Citadel Mall, the Epic Center, as well, right?
That's correct. So this water right now all flows north into that DuPont-Wapu district, which then contributes to the flooding, obviously, that we have throughout all of DuPont and Wapu, really. And DuPont-Wapu is, if you all remember, is in that roughly 75-25 jurisdictional split, with city being about 75 and county being about 25. And that's where we've done some cost matching on those projects as well. So the idea that Councilman Waring was mentioning, and I think was one of the things that he and some other gentlemen had proposed a few years ago, was could we take some of this water and direct it out a different way that's more efficient to the marsh, rather than pushing it into the DuPont-Wapu neighborhood that it goes now, and basically causing flooding in that neighborhood as well. So it floods, two neighborhoods currently.
Right. So I really did look at this as a twofer. I mean, you're helping Citadel Woods, Air Harbor area, and then taking water out of the, drainage basin there, the doo-wop drainage basin with Citadel Mall and all of that.
Yeah, this is just one of those issues, Councilman Moran, that you and I have battled back and forth about annexation, and we're fortunate that we've had good cooperation, even with the Lake Dodera that we were talking about earlier. Getting the county's cooperation with that, and the state's involvement, and then this, we're fortunate as well that we're able to support it. And I think this goes back probably to my early days on council, maybe even before this was on the radar screen. In getting this done, it's just taken such a long time.
And I think as far as drainage projects go, it doesn't cost as much as, I mean, this isn't a $50 million drainage. Right.
Yes. And it goes back to that axiom. Sometimes the biggest problems can be solved with the smallest amount of money. And this is an example of that.
That's right.
Thanks, Matt, for that update. That's just such good information. And I know there's a lot of moving parts with this, and it impacts several city council districts as well. Councilman Waring, Councilman Pell.
I think it's maybe like 5 districts, man.
Yeah.
Councilman Pell, Councilman Brady.
Mine.
Yours, mine, right?
Yep.
Yeah, there's only 4 or 5 of them. Thank you, Mr. Fountain.
It even helps county council member districts.
Correct. Maybe even some people up in the state house. Mr. Fountain, again, thank you. Discussion regarding Lake Sandhurst, Mr. Fountain and then Councilman Shea.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is one that Councilman Sheed had requested, looking at a request that had been sent in to him, I think, from the neighborhood that surrounds Lake Sandhurst on some challenges they're having with the kind of the lake that also serves somewhat as a drainage feature for the community. And if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd let Councilman Shea take it from there, and I'm happy to provide any
That'd be
details.
great. Councilman?
I'll chime in. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for getting this on the agenda. We may have some folks who may have tried to log in. So back in December, before Christmas time, I received an email from the president of the Lake Sandhurst Association, which, you think you hear it all while serving on city council. And this was a new one for me, frankly. Even though I'd walked in Sandhurst and ridden around Sandhurst a million times, I was unaware that there was a Lake Sandhurst, nevertheless a Lake Sandhurst Association. So I've been in contact with Matt about it and with the legal department and meeting with the people who are members of this. So this is about 30 or so different residences that circle around this body of water called Lake Sandhurst, going back to the early to mid 1960s when Sandhurst was developed and built out. So this was a amenity lake, in which some of the old timers will tell me that they were swimming in the lake, swinging off of a tree vine, maybe even doing a little canoeing. It was just that deep. So apparently over time, the lake has filled in, silted in, I guess. And we have city stormwater runoff ditches that feed into this lake. There's a dam, an earthen dam built to keep the water in, and they've got pipes that feed the water out into the marsh, into the Ashley River. Well, over time, this lake has gotten more shallow and less of an amenity, and it's in some people's eyes, it may be even a nuisance to some extent. It's beautiful out there when you walk around the neighborhood. It's lovely out there, but they've got some serious issues now with the lake, and it's soaking in, and maintenance of this dam has become a costly function for everybody. I'm not asking anybody to do anything tonight. I'm just wanted to bring this to council's attention, Mr. Chairman. I've asked the issues dealing with this. We've got the legal department looking into the city's, I'll use for lack of a better word, involvement or responsibility if there's some regarding this. Of course, as we have found out over the course of time, when you are traveling back into the 1960s, record keeping was not as good as it is right now, in getting access to easements or the verification of easements out there is going to be a little bit of an issue. So I don't know if any of my constituents from Lake Sandhurst are on here, if they wanted to add something to what I'm saying. I did meet with them in late January. They have an annual meeting. We were at the Westminster Presbyterian Church. It was a very crowded meeting with a lot of questions. They have contracted with True Love Construction Company to address some of the issues dealing with the dam out there. But they may be looking towards the city for some assistance, since we've been using the lake as, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it, this is probably not the right term, but as a retention lake, to retention pond to receive some of the stormwater runoff. Right. So we got some issues involved in it. But my purpose of bringing this forward was just for discussion purposes and let council be aware of what we may be coming back to for some future reference on this lake. I appreciate the time to talk with y'all. I appreciate Matt and legal department looking into this for me. So that's where we sort of stand with it right now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you for bringing this forward. Any comments, additional comments on that discussion? So in other words, this will be coming back sooner rather than later, probably.
Yeah.
On the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Fountain and Councilman Sheehy. Procurement discussion. Now, this may be our G5. We had a budget workshop about last week sometime, and I had a good bit of discussion on this one where For about 20 years or more, staff level improvement was at 40,000, and we had a good discussion carrying up to 100,000. And Mr. Fountain, I see you've got a nice presentation. You want to move forward?
That's Ms. Wharton, I think, has
Ms. Wharton.
this one, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Wharton, would you let us know your thoughts on this?
I will. Some of this will be repeat for a few of you, but
Okay.
we've had a team of people that have been working on some procurement excellence, and I have just the people like Gary Cooper, our procurement director, Robin Barrett Robinson, our senior buyer, Susan Petit, Ruth Jordan, Mallory Sharon Legal, and Matt Perlick, who have been on this team. And they've been mapping our procurement process to identify pain points. We've conducted a dozen interviews with staff about the process challenges, and they created an implementation plan to address one of the biggest challenges. What they did find is the biggest challenge we have is timing delays in our process. So one way that we could combat that issue would be to increase the city's threshold for a formal competitive procurement, which is currently at $30,000. They did some research with other cities and found that our city's thresholds are much lower than nearly everybody around us. And as a result, we discussed the potential of the city increasing its formal competitive procurement threshold to $100,000 with other adjustments to the policy to account for this change. And as you all know, the city council approval limit right now is $40,000. So you see anything that's $40,000 and above. So the last time this is a little bit new for the ad hoc members that saw this last week. But the last time the limit was changed was in 2007, and that was changed from $20,000 to $40,000. And obviously since then we've had a good bit of inflation. That rate has been 2.27% per year between 2007 and today, with a cumulative price increase of 43.14%. So today's prices are 1.43 times as high as average prices in 2007. So our dollar only buys 69.93% of what we could buy back then, just as additional information. Our large indefinite, so we've had other small increases in 2019. We increased our indefinite delivery contract, which we will say from now on IDC contracts, from $300,000 to $500,000. These are mainly used by our stormwater department, and Matt can speak to this. And we increase them due to the high cost of the contracts and just the cost of the projects that they do. We are now requesting to increase that to $750,000 from $500,000. All of that would still come to council for approval. It's just the contract amount in itself. So it would still come to council for approval. We're not asking that staff have the leeway to approve up to $750,000. I just want to make that clear. That was confusing last time we talked about it. And then the formal solicitation amount was increased in 2019 from $20,000 to $30,000, and we're requesting to increase that to $100,000. So these are our current limits that we have. Council is 40,000. We're asking 40,000. We're asking to increase that to 100. You can see all these other things where the large IDC contract is 500,000. We're asking for 750, and the formal solicitation from 30,000 to 100,000.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wharton. Could you touch on, you all, Mr. Fountain? There's still going to be competitiveness in this now. So, I mean, not like won't be competitively charged, just that it won't take as long. That's
right. So I just have a little bit of statistics. So based on 2022, increasing the limits on the previous slide as we're requesting, council, you would just reduce the amount of items going to council by 32.9% if you just base it on 2022. So council would still be approving 67% of the transactions. So you can see for capital project items, the number of items that were below 50,000, or I'm sorry, that were below the council approval was only 15 of those items. So you would still be approving more than not approving, I guess. And same with bids and purchases. There was only 32 items that were brought to council last year that were below $100,000. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense to me.
So then I just looked at our agenda for tomorrow night. And if you look at that agenda, and it's a little bit weird because, you know, we're in our lease purchase where we're buying a lot of vehicles. So there's a lot of bids and purchases this time. So there's 24 bids and purchase items. 12 of those items are under 100,000 and would not have to come to council if we were to increase the limits, just to give you some context. But 9 of those items were for vehicles and equipment. And you know, too, we had that big, long discussion about our issue with trying to buy vehicles right now with the way the market is. So when we said that these limits would help us in that regard, this is a good example of that, because 9 of those items are for vehicles and equipment that are below 100,000. There are 17 additional items on the agenda. 6 of those were grant related, which council will always see. Of the remaining 11 items, only 3 of those items were under 100,000. So council would still have to approve 73% of the items. So just putting it in context in the number of items you'll still be seeing, we'll be saving a little bit, but council will be seeing the majority of the items still. Does that make sense? And these are our limits compared to other jurisdictions as they currently stand.
Okay.
And then I just had it to where we're requesting, so you can see where we would be with all of those other jurisdictions with what we're asking for. I know I'm going fast, so just slow me down.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Some of us already had this.
I just want to make sure. And then there was one other question that came with this process, and it's about minority and women business enterprises, vendors. So we realized that one of the problems that could happen is if it might hurt our MWBE participation. And we did a little bit of research on that, and Charleston County has a mandatory program for this, which we could also include in our policy. We talked about this at ad hoc last week, and based on those conversations, we would draft a policy that would be included in the proposed changes that we'll bring to council later.
That's great.
Is there any questions on that?
Any questions from committee members? Don't see any hands right now, but
Sorry.
Councilmember Bowden, you have a question?
I want to make sure that the county's policy deals with, I guess, procurements that are between 10,000 and 100. What about above 100,000? Did they just not have a policy on this? Do we have a policy on this?
We do. It's just that is because of the threshold that goes to council for approval. So that's why it's up to $100,000, which are like that. So anything up to $99,999.99, we would have that policy, because 100 above goes to council, and there is a policy as well.
Thank you. Numbers are hard. Sorry.
That's okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And regarding this requirement, on the certification list, I would just like to point out that there's a move afoot by the Chamber of Commerce, and we're partnering with them to kind of consolidate everybody's certification list so that in my view, it kind of expands the pool of potential minority and women-owned vendors. And so I would like, as long as we're kind of in the same club, I think we honor, for example, the county's certification process, even though we have our own, and maybe some more thought needs to go into this. But I'd like the pool to be as broad as possible, as long as we're comfortable with everybody's certification. You know, like the DOT has a certification as well. And, you know, sometimes there might be a minority business that's on the DOT list or the county list that's not on ours. And it would be good to you know, combine everybody's list to have it as inclusive as possible.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, Mayor, that is our intent.
Great, terrific.
All right. Mr. Fountain, you have any last comments?
I think you touched, Mr. Chairman, on it quite a bit, that the intent of this, for us, at least for a stormwater perspective, and I think public services as well, if Mr. Brown wants to chime in, is that trying to speed up some of the smaller, more straightforward projects by basically being able to take them to construction quicker. They still go through the legal review, they still go through contracting, they still go through competitive procurement, but it does significantly shorten the time to construction, and it significantly shortens the cost of preparation with the less formal bidding process.
Hey, thank you. Part of some credit on this certainly needs to go to Council Lady Parker. She called with a meeting with Mr. Fountain as well as some sustainability folk on small projects, and as part of that discussion, she came up. One of the handcuffs being put on our staff is this, 40, this low approval limit, which, and I know staff had been talking about this for a while, but I'm really glad this has bubbled up to the top to now be hopefully an actionable item coming before council to take some action on. Ms. Wharton, I didn't mean to step on your toes on next steps, but
Not stepping at all. So if everybody seems okay with that, we will draft something and try to get it either the next meeting of council or the first meeting in March.
any final comments? Anybody in disagreement with that?
Thank you for bringing it forward, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, no problem. I'll thank Mr. Fountain, Ms. Wharton, actually Councilwoman Parker had a lot of hand in that too. So it's been a lot of conversation on this for actually probably 2-3 years, but I'm glad to see it now.
Yeah,
in the process.
The team that's been working on this as well, that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so thank all the people in capital projects, everybody. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Low battery wall, Mr. Fountain.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the phase 4 design contract. We're recommending it's in the form of a fee amendment, the way we do our professional service contracts, but this is adding in the design services, design and permitting services for phase 4, which is the final phase, stretching from the end of phase 3 at roughly King Street, all the way around to South Battery, about 1,200 feet of wall. The cost of the design services, $460,000, $14.50. This is funded out of the existing project allocation.
All right, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Move for approval.
Properly moved in. These seconds, these seconds is hard on this committee. Yeah. Second, probably moved in second. Obviously kudos goes out to Mr. Frank Newham and all the team on this one, man. I've been sending people down to low battery by streams. I'm just so proud of what's taking place down there. Any questions on this? All in favor, would you please say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Fountain. Spring Fishburne, item 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a part of phase 5, the early phase 5, the pump procurement, where basically we're providing owner furnished equipment due to the lead time on the large pumps for the station. If you recall, we previously approved about $6 million to purchase the 3 very large pumps for the project. Due to the timing of when those pumps will be delivered, which the lead time on the pumps is long, and actually the lead time on the diesel engines that power the pumps is even slightly longer than that. The pumps will basically be coming in after we've been able to construct the majority of the pump station. So what we're going to do, or what we're recommending to do, is to basically after the pumps are assembled, tested, and proofed at the factory, they will disassemble the pumps, ship them disassembled, and then they will be installed by the internal crane system for the actual pump station that's built to eventually be able to service and replace the pumps at some point in the future. So there's an additional cost to disassemble those pumps, ship them that way. But it does let us build the pump station instead of basically waiting to build the pump station until the pumps have arrived.
Right.
Also, while there is a cost in this contract, It does mean that the construction contractor doesn't have to mobilize the extremely large crane and likely close down part of Lockwood that it would take to normally install those pumps into the bays. So we would expect a very similar cost reduction in the eventual construction contract, which we'll be bidding in the next few months. So I would, while there is an increase in this cost, generally it's a roughly cost neutral approach for the project. There's also included in this item, adding the sales and use tax, which is the remittance of use tax that's in here. So that's 162,000 on the original 6 million because it's an out-of-state vendor, and there often is a lot of confusion on whether tax should be charged or not. So BFRC is making sure we keep our I's dotted, T's crossed, and numbers all adding up. But it is basically is 183,000 for the assembly of those 3 pumps in total, not for each pump, and then the additional 162 for the use tax.
It kind of falls in the category of Fram oil filter. You pay me now, pay me later. Probably later it's gonna cost a little bit more. What's the pleasure of the committee? The motion?
So moved.
Second.
Probably moving second. Any more questions to Mr. Fountain on this? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 8, now Concord Street, Mr. Fountain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I know it's been a long night. This is our last item from the stormwater side. This is we talked earlier about the MUSC pump station upfit contract. This is the Concord Street pump station upfit. Unfortunately, the Army Corps of Engineers does not have a funding authorization or appropriation to help us with this project. This is one that we've been doing in-house. This is a 20-year-old pump station that is in sort of the throes of the problems of a 20-year-old pump station that we're trying to avoid with the Corps on the MUSC pump station. If you recall, we have Black & Veatch as our primary design consultant. Because we're upfitting this pump station, it has to continue running in front of the IAM as it's opening. We're running this as a construction manager at risk contract, where basically the contractor and engineer all work collaboratively to come up with a GMP. It's very challenging to run a pump station while you're improving it. So it's good to have that contractor in from day one, working with the engineer from an early point of the contract, working with the engineer on how exactly all those kind of careful synchronization will be handled. So this is the pre-construction services contract on the competitively RFQ and procured professional services of that construction manager at risk contract. The pre-construction service work with Ruby Collins, which was the firm selected by the selection committee, is $542,490. This includes the costs to basically go in and dewater the tunnel and wet well system, have staff go down with a crane and the safety protocols with the safety company down into the tunnel to inspect the wet well and verify any repairs or improvements that need to be made as part of the design contract. That's part of the reason the cost is higher, as that tends to be a couple $100,000 worth of work. Approval of this contract again obligates that money out of our existing project budget, which is funded from the drainage fund.
Any comments? Mr. Fountain, don't apologize for all this money's becoming to appropriate, because when we appropriate money on stormwater projects, people issues get solved. Any additional comments on item 7? Hearing none. So motion.
Sorry, item 8, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, I said 7, but I meant 8.
So moved.
Concord Street. Street. Probably moving seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Now I want to thank the people who waited on item F 1, 2, and 3 while we got through those actionable items. Environmental service update, Mr. Altock.
Yeah, afternoon, Chairman. Nothing new to report. Everything is running on time this week. Last week, we're getting garbage trucks back out finally. Parts are arriving, so we've been able to fix that stuff and get the trucks back out and running. Other than that, everything seems to be running really good, and hopefully it continues that way this week.
Well, listen, when you say you have nothing to report, do you realize what kind of joy that brings to all of us?
I figured it would help. But yeah, so far so good this week. Last week was really good. Like I said, we're getting trucks out, and I think we should be good next week for the holiday, having everything up and running.
Man, listen, thank you what all you all do, Mr. Alltop and Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, how are y'all doing on the staffing side? I know we got an update maybe a month or so ago. Just wanted to maybe get a little update from you.
Yeah, so we're bringing some new employees online. Last week, we had a new sweeper driver start, a couple of ground custodians out there for King Street. We have a couple other offers for garbage driver and another trash driver that's out there. And then we've made a selection for the new route supervisor for trash. So we are making progress.
That sounds great. Thank you, Matt.
Again, man, thank you for all you do. Any
Mr.
questions?
Chairman, I'd like
Mr.
to add,
O'Brien. Yes,
on the
sir.
route supervisor, we were able to promote from within, which I think is very important here in the city. This is a young man who's worked his way up through the ranks and now is going to be taking a supervisory position. And we've had a lot of success up there in our operational activities with doing that. And I think Matt made a really good choice. And this is a young man we're looking for good things from. But I just wanted to report it's because of the pay system and things we put in, people have really applied for these jobs, but to have the ability to report and promote somebody from within has really been important for us, and it helps the morale up there a lot.
Great observation. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Alltop and your team. Any more input? All right. F2, update on Dominion tree trimming. I see Ms. Coghill has had
Mr.
great
Chairman,
patience waiting.
We have Tammy Coghill. Thank you, Tammy, for joining us tonight. Her staff members, and also Jason Kronsberg, and I think David Grant from Urban Forestry is on the line. And I'm just going to turn it over to them. This is something that you gentlemen and ladies and council have spoken about at some meetings recently, so we have asked for an update. So we're just going to turn it over to them and let them speak and let you guys ask them some questions.
All right, great. Ms. Coghill?
All right. Thank you for the invitation, Chairman Waring, Mr. O'Brien. We certainly value and appreciate our partnership with the council and city staff as we work to safeguard our critical infrastructure as well as our employees and the public, while also working with staff to eliminate future conflicts through a right tree, right place focus. Joining me tonight is Clay Chaplin. Che is one of our certified arborists, and Clay is managing the two projects that we currently have underway with the city of Charleston. So I'll switch now to screen share and we will be underway.
Okay.
Okay. Switching, hopefully. Yep. All right. Can you hear me, sir?
We can.
All right, great. Dominion Energy has thousands of miles of overhead distribution and transmission lines in South Carolina, and that includes hundreds of miles within the city of Charleston. So with a growing season here on the coast of nearly 300 days a year, we must undertake vegetation management somewhere across our system every single day. In Charleston, of course, that effort is led by our certified arborists, who also carry an additional certification by the International Society of Arboriculture as utility specialists. So tonight we'll discuss our public outreach, our coordination with the city, reliability, and our current utility safeguarding projects. As far as public outreach and coordination with the city of Charleston, we are really focused on this and have a number of methods here that I've indicated. These include an email or postcard to customers. We typically target 2 or 3 weeks ahead of when we're going to be in their neighborhoods, and include a phone number for questions. We have coordinated with the South Carolina Native Plant Society for a list of recommended plantings that are compatible with overhead power lines. That list, as well as several videos on how we trim, why we trim, storm restoration, an outage map, as well as how to stay safe around power lines, are all on our website and promoted through various social media outlets throughout the year. And just this year, we're really excited. You'll see on your map a screen grab from a new interactive trimming map on my screen. This is something they've been working on for a while and excited to launch. Generally, if your constituents see a crew around town and want to know if we'll be trimming in their neighborhood, if they're headed their way, they can now look it up on this interactive map. So we're really, really proud of that. I cannot stress enough what a great team you have in the Parks Department, led by Jason Kronsberg. Without a doubt, they are advocates for healthy canopy, effective projects, and good customer communication. Our coordination with them has been multifaceted. First, we meet annually, of course, to review the upcoming year's projects, also provide a general monthly status report, but more importantly, your urban forester, David Grant, and others talk to our team routinely. They visit sensitive areas ahead of work commencing. They provide inspections, investigate complaints and concerns. Basically, that team is your eyes in the field behind our work. For several years, we've jointly hosted public informational drop-ins like the one just recently held at Charlestown Landing this past fall ahead of the West Ashley work that you'll hear about shortly. The commitment of council and staff to a streamlined underground process, including a staff member and task force dedicated to that, as well as an updated street tree manual, that informs the development review and permitting process, are all keys to right tree, right place. I think we're all excited about the potential to eliminate future conflicts. So maybe sometime in the near future, we won't be having these meetings about tree pruning. So our work is critical to the #1 responsibility and obligation we have for safety and reliability. At the end of the day, there is nothing else that matters to our company more. Customers expect it, and our regulators require it. We do not have a choice on removing conflicts. Whether it's indirect or direct with people or with our infrastructure, that is what drives us. The #1 cause of outages on our system, hands down, is trees and tree limbs. Keeping a regular cycle to take back reflushing sucker growth on existing vegetation is really the key to this reliability and to safety. This chart on the left shows the average number of minutes customers have been without power in 4-year intervals. You'll see that we've reduced the average annual outage on our system. Now, this is absent major storms, but by more than 40% since 2020. And so in that 20-year span, we have gone down to an average of only 84 minutes on the system. This exceeds beats the Southeast average. Major storms are their own animal, but a regular, and are not included in these numbers, but a regular safeguarding program has made the difference. I was thinking in putting this together during Hurricane Hugo, I was out without power for 3 weeks. Granted, that was a monster record-breaking storm, but the expectations nowadays are quite different. All of us on the call in this meeting get calls within hours now of a storm passing by, not within weeks. So that may be a little unrealistic, but we understand that the evolving expectations that we're just dealt with today, and continue to strive to harden the system with maintenance and response preparation. Now, it's not 3 weeks. Most customers in our recent major events were restored within 48 hours, and we're very proud of that, but it takes the work like we're talking about today with the constant management program. Day in and day out, though, our major driver is safety. Keeping limbs and other vegetation outside of the danger zone is pivotal to keeping both our employees and our customers, your citizens, safe. Again, we do not have a choice in this, but very much appreciate your understanding and support of that responsibility, which translates to crews in the neighborhoods and calls to you. So I will turn it over to Clay now.
Thank you. So our vegetation management program here at Dominion is an integral part of maintaining our system and safe and reliable system. We manage the system on a 5-year cycle. So every 5 years, we'll be returning to the same location, the same neighborhoods to do our pruning cycles. The diagram on the screen is a good depiction of the actual facilities we have in the field and the clearances and the safe zones that we try to manage. If you pay attention to let me see if I can get the cursor. So I'm going to point to some of the parts of the poles on the screen while we go through this. So we have 10-foot minimum clearances to the side. That's your standard side safe clearance. That's 10 feet minimum. You got 20-foot overhang clearance. That's above the poles, above the lines, 20-foot minimum. If you look down a little further, we have our neutral wires. We usually keep a 4-foot minimum below that. All of these work together to give us our safe clearance zones. If you look at the bottom of the poles, you have 15 foot either side of the pole. Yes, your 15-foot right-of-ways that we manage all across the system. We've got some pretty good depictions of the down guys, vines growing on poles. We have woody debris that grows up in that 15-foot areas. We manage all of that. On the right-hand side, we depict a service wire. A lot of calls come in, both to us and the city, asking about service wires. And we do trim for abrasion on those, but they do not get the 10-foot clearances that the primary wires do. And I'll continue to the next slide. So our specs, how do we obtain those spec clearances? We use the proper trimming techniques. This is a very good depiction of those techniques. This is straight from the Best Management Practices Manual produced by the ISA. You can see the example on the left. It shows power lines. It shows limbs that are interfering with those power lines. You have a 10-foot clearance. Where that 10-foot clearance is, you do not get a proper cut when you make the cut there. So you have to go further than that 10-foot to make that proper cut at the proper location on that tree. And in doing so, making the proper cuts at the proper locations, you wind up with the V-shape and the L-shaped trees that you see on the right. I know we get a lot of questions about those. The city gets a lot of questions about those. But yes, it is the proper way to prune. And once they're pruned that way, you have a structure. During the 5-year cycle, you do have regrowth, but that structure stays there. And then you can trim right back to that same structure that was there in the next cycle. We'll go to the next slide. Let's continue into the projects that we're doing right now. J16, this is a current project that's started in 2022. It was a 2022 project. It's carried over into 2023. It's approximately 19 miles. Estimated completion in mid-February. We've included some pictures on here. These are common problems that will occur all along our system in Charleston. You know, wires coming too close. You'll have palm trees coming in contact with wires. These are all common issues on all of our projects that are in the city of Charleston. But the map of J16 is to the right, and that it takes in some sensitive areas on the peninsula, Wagner Terrace, Hampton Park area, Rutledge Avenue, parts of Rutledge, parts of King Street. So it's a pretty sensitive area, but we're going to be wrapping that up very soon. We'll continue on to the next current project, which is actually project K14 West Ashley. This is a huge project, so approximately 100 miles of overhead lines. The work began last December 2022. It started a little early. This is a 2023 project, so it started just about a month early. We did have an outreach right beforehand. We started sending out some notifications. We actually had the outreach before then, and we had a little turnout for that. We do anticipate having another outreach because this is such a big project. We start moving further into the project, get on the south end of it, probably have another outreach if the city would like.
These are examples of what we see in the field.
And here's some more examples that we have that we've included on this slide. We've got some interference there with the wire. We have palm fronds and palm seed heads. They start getting in contact, catch on fire. Some big issues for us. Just trying to keep everything safe. And kind of to wrap that up, we have right tree, right place. We can't stress this enough. If you start with the right tree in the right place, you'll kind of limit those conflicts in the future.
Great. And we want to just in closing recognize these are excerpts actually from the Charleston Street Tree Manual, and really again appreciate Jason and David and Clark and all that team working to be sure that future development respects that and has some great guidance on what plantings can be where and should be where. So I'll stop sharing now, and hopefully if that goes right. And thank you for your time. And we're certainly here for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Cargill. I tell you, man, I want to kudos to your co-worker, man. I can see you pushing through, man.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. We're all battling the lingering effects of the crud.
That's right. Hope you feel better. Questions from committee members? Anybody want to be recognized? Councilman Sheehy?
So I think we had this presentation of some version of it earlier, and I think what you take away from all of this is don't plant too close I mean, Tammy, that sounds simplistic, but I mean, that's essentially what you're telling us, is that when we're putting trees around and trying to do great landscaping and streetscaping, this is a little bit smarter in how we go about doing that, right?
Absolutely. And thank you for referencing that. And we were happy to send, I'll follow up and send links to that planting list and those kinds of things, so you have them to share with your constituents. But so excited about what the city's doing on the permitting side with development. So hopefully, as I said, I'd love to talk to you about something else one year.
I know you would. And but you know, it's just, and people are, and God bless our constituents, but they are very concerned about this. They're very much involved in it. And you know, this is not a knock on Dominion Energy, but when these trees are planted so close and they come up and then you trim them, they don't look pretty at all. And I think we get more pushback from our constituents when they see this and thinking that we could do a better job with that. But I don't know, there's no other way around it. I mean, the trees have to be either removed, or this is going to be the end product of that trimming process with that. So we appreciate Dominion Energy's consultation with us and collaboration with us. And if we could do a better job somehow, Tammy, we're all ears. So thank y'all for the presentation.
Thank you. I was going to ask Mr. Consberg to speak to that coordination, but I see the mayor's hand, and then I'll come back to Mr. Consberg. Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Tammy. And we appreciate the fact that your service level and downtime has improved. That is terrific. You know, unfortunately, for a long time, maybe the wrong species got planted in the wrong space. And in some older parts of our city, those live oak trees might have been there before we started hanging the wires. They've been around a long time. I'm just curious whether we could, you know, tweak the rules a little bit for the most precious species. The one I'm thinking about is our live oak trees. I mean, when you go through South Windermere, Councilmember Appel, or Old Windermere, or over on James Island, anywhere in the city, those trees are so beautiful and they're so loved. And, you know, most of them are pretty mature. They don't grow that fast anymore. I'm just wondering if you could reduce the clearance from 10 feet, say, to 7 or 6 feet, or a little bit less, and give them a little more respect, so to speak, and still accomplish, you know, your goals in terms of service level. And if there were anything else like that that could, not for every tree, but, you know, particularly those that I would look to the arborists and our parks department maybe to tell me which trees you know, would be considered. I only can think of the live oak one, but is that possible for us to look at that? Would that help us?
Well, I would say first that those beautiful canopies and corridors have been trimmed many cycles over, and they continue to flesh in to continue to be beautiful canopies. So right. It is not a static moment in time, but I'll defer to Clay for a comment on the actual specifications and our safety requirements.
Yeah, I can speak on that a little bit, because each situation is going to be individual to each tree. What we do have with our specifications, we do have some exceptions to the rules already built in. It's not going to be a blanket exception. But in each limb, like when I have my 10-foot minimum, sometimes we go further than that 10 to get a proper cut. Sometimes we don't have that 10. Sometimes we have an exceptional clearance that's a little closer. That's why you do have very large trees in West Ashley, in parts of West Ashley, parts of downtown, parts of James Island. Very large trees, very large leaders. Every situation will be unique when it does meet an exception.
And I'll defer to Jason and David to speak to that anymore, but they do look ahead of trimming and talk about specific large trees and specimen trees like that. But each tree presents a different situation, and again, If there's a large leader, then that's treated differently, and where they can get that safe clearance, they have the latitude to trim less if it still is healthy for the tree.
Yeah, I hear you. I just, y'all cover such large areas. You see those maps of whole neighborhoods y'all got to cover. I just question whether individual trees get that kind of scrutiny, by the time your crews, contractors are out there, trying to make time and get the job done. So anyway, still seems to me like something we could pursue to just try to protect those really grand trees as much as possible.
We'll certainly continue to look as closely at those as we can.
Councilmember Pell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Dominion for joining us on a perfectly nice, Monday evening to talk about this. It's a very important issue, and especially for me as the council member that represents the oldest neighborhoods in West Ashley and James Island, where Mayor Tecklenburg alluded to a minute ago. You've just got tremendously wonderful trees, and I'm thinking about the trees in the old Windermere neighborhood, Riverland Terrace over on James Island. These are just truly remarkable trees, and my foray into public office sort of started around this issue when the crews came through the South Windermere area in like the 2018-2019 time period. And we discovered at that time that the tree protection agreement between the city of Charleston and SCE&G expired back in 1990. Now, obviously there were still relationships, and there was a lot of that agreement being informally honored and things of that nature. But that effort culminated into a new tree protection agreement being entered into between the city of Charleston and Dominion back in 2020. And so really what I wanted to do with putting this item on the agenda and having everybody convene is just to double, triple, and quadruple check that we're all on the same page, we're all talking to one another, so that we make sure we're following the tree protection agreement, we're following the mandates that Dominion is under from the PSC and otherwise, just to make sure that when the time comes for that crew member with the chainsaw in his hand, that everything is connecting and we're not losing anything in translation. And in the medical industry, when you're looking over medical records and surgical records, you'll see oftentimes depicted something called a timeout. And what that is before people go to operate on limbs and things of that nature, they will literally stop the proceeding and make sure everybody is on the same page with regards to what limb we're operating on, what we're doing, why we're doing it. And I just think that we need to have that built into this process. And just to make sure, again, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a huge service area that you're working on in 2023, and y'all have got contractors, and we just need to make sure everything is harmonized. There is language in the tree protection agreement for special attention for grand trees, and the city having the ability to elect to have an arborist on site when the grand trees are being pruned. And I just encourage our staff and Dominion to utilize these measures where appropriate, pre-cutting, pre-sending the crews through the neighborhoods, just to really make sure that when it comes to the remarkable trees, the truly special trees, that we all have our eyes on it. We take that time out and we make sure that we go in there with the care and attention that's necessary to balance, of course, what Dominion has to do, the very important job Dominion has to do with our trees. So I just wanted to remind everybody we've got that agreement out there, encourage everybody to talk to each other. We do a great job of doing that already, but it never hurts to double and triple check to make sure that everything is going okay. The last thing I'll say is we have, we have a new undergrounding non-standard service ordinance in effect at the city of Charleston. So long term, the goal, at least in some of the older neighborhoods, is to get the lines underground. We've finished projects in the Crescent. We finished projects in Country Club 2. We're almost getting there with Wapu Heights. That's another story for maybe offline. But Old Windermere is a neighborhood that's on the list. I think it's number 3 or 4. Let's also take into account the fact that we don't want to trim a whole lot only for the wires to be underground the next year or two. We're also working on ways to do smaller projects through our undergrounding process. We've even talked about micro projects where we can literally just drop the lines underground for 3 or 4 houses at a time around particularly magnificent trees. There's a lot of complications and technical details that go into this. I just want to alert my colleagues and everybody else that work continues. It's something we've got to continue to prioritize and put the necessary resources and brain power in to solving these problems, because I think the more we can get some of these resources underground, the less conflicts we have. Because of course, as as the mayor noted, I mean, the conflicts in my district are not due to any decision that anybody made since the FDR administration in terms of when these trees were planted. So this is not making sure as part of Cane Hoy we're not planting trees under power lines. So we've got some unique issues in this part of town, and I just want to encourage everybody to keep talking with one another. I'll do my part in helping to get the word out to my constituents and letting folks know what's going on, why it's happening. I mean, we've all seen it. No matter how much publicity we do, the work starts happening and people lose their. I mean, it's a shock. It's a shock to see your environment change like this. And I understand what y'all are doing. There's a very good, logical, rational explanation for it, but we're on the receiving end of the also very understandable emotional reaction to seeing trees cut the way that they're being cut. And I think that if we all continue to work together and message this properly, and as the mayor said, maybe give a little bit of special attention around, special resources, we can bring this in for as soft as a landing as we can and continue to work together. So thank you all again for all this. And if I can help with anything, please don't ever hesitate.
Thank you,
I appreciate
Councilman. Councilman Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Councilman, will probably have to keep on reminding you that my district has the oldest neighborhood. It's called Charlestown Landing. And, along with some other neighborhoods along there. So, you want to brag about the oldest neighborhood.
Oldest neighborhood in South Carolina.
Oldest neighborhood in South Carolina. But I on a more serious note, I do want to emphasize something that two things that you said that I think we need to keep mindful of. Number one is the area of due diligence on all of our parts to make sure that the agreement is being followed. And the second part is we do have a mechanism of burying some of these lines, getting them out of the area. It makes a huge difference. And Tammy, I would suspect that the more lines we have that are below ground as opposed to underground would decrease that number of power outages even so much more significantly than that graph that you showed us. So that is, I don't think we're taking full advantage of those opportunities on our new ordinance. And we need to push that even more vigorously. And I would encourage us to do that. So I just wanted to emphasize those 2 points that you brought out, Councilmember Pound. Thank you for doing that.
Ms. Cargill, I inadvertently cut across you. I think you had a comment to make.
Not at all. I was just responding to Councilman Appel. Just two quick things that I think two of the main purposes of our annual meeting are to look very specifically at the routes so that those grand tree areas and areas of sensitivity and concern can be identified early on, and then we can our staff and David ride those areas well ahead, and then continue to be mindful of when that work is going to happen, as well as talking about what kind of public outreach that the city would like to have, again, surrounding those areas that are perhaps more sensitive, more ecologically delicate.
Thank you. Any final comments to Ms. Cargill and her colleague? We're about to come up on the last item, which has been a very challenging agenda. We had a lot of things on this agenda.
Mr. Chairman, ready to talk about the AT&T?
Yes, sir. Ms. Cargill, thank you all for being there and your input. I'm going to give Mr. Kronsberg a break on this one today. Let's move on to we're an hour and a half into this meeting, so let's move on to AT&T, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Several recent council members, we've had some concerns from council members receiving from their constituents, work being done by AT&T or their subs in various neighborhoods and locations. Three specific locations that I'm aware of are Village Green Subdivision, 1864 Piper Drive, and 1528 Birthright Street. And we've received several complaints from citizens, and we've sent inspectors out to investigate. I had the privilege today to speak to Mr. Jason Eckstein, who's the regional director for AT&T, and him and I are going to have another meeting either sometime this week or next week to discuss some of these issues. As you're aware, he's as concerned as we are and wants to make sure that things are done right. And I just want to make sure that I was very honest with him, told him in some instances that the subs just don't seem to have the same respect that the AT&T crews do, and we just need to make sure that they understand how important it is and to treat our citizens with respect. Don't block driveways, damages that are done, to work to assure that we clear and trace those up. So I just want to let the committee know that we will be meeting with Mr. Eckstein and his team to and I'll give you a report after that meeting in our next meeting as to how that came out. But he's as concerned as we are about some of the issues we've heard about. I just wanted to pass that on to everybody.
All right, Councilman Shea.
Yeah, and thanks for putting this on the agenda. And Tom has been very responsive to my inquiries about this. And we mentioned Birthright was one of them. So, Tom, I would just add to your laundry list of when you had these discussions, part of this is just notice to the neighborhood that they're coming out, what is going on, because a lot of people don't know who these folks are. They're subcontractors. There's no advance notice of what's transpiring, and then all the other things that you mentioned are just as equally as important. What we had this anecdotal issue when they were out in Sandhurst, and the rumors were that they were preparing a bike path crossing over from Sandhurst into North Charleston over the North Bridge. Like we spent, I can't know how many man hours we had. Tom look into it. We had T&T folks look into it. It was just, reckless misinformation being passed out there that had nothing to do with pedestrian bridge, but everybody thought they were building a road out there to it. And so the harm that it causes, from our standpoint, this misinformation and misconduct, it just needs to be addressed. So, Tom, thanks for being diligent on that. And
yes, sir. And I, to your point, also, council member, just like Matt and his crews do with stormwater, when we're going to be in the neighborhood, we're going to ask AT&T when they're going to be in there doing work. Let's get that notice out. I think you heard Tammy mention that with their operation also. So, as you mentioned, communication is so important. People know what's going on, when it's going on, and what's going on. It just makes it so much easier on all of us.
Councilman Bowden.
Thank you. If I could just add to that, listen, and I think that was such a great point. Just who to call if something goes wrong. I mean, I know they can always reach out to us, but it's not always obvious to us who to call. So we call you, Tom, and it's just kind of a process. I think people feel a lot better if there's just a phone number that they can call themselves.
Absolutely. And we'll work with them, if the damages are in the public right of way, we'll work with them and make sure. If it's on private property, it's a little bit different because that's between the contractor and them, but we'll point them in the right direction. And I said, Jason was very, very concerned today when him and I spoke. So we'll get together and have some good information for you next time we get together.
All right. Any final comments? Mr. Mayor, any last words on that? Alrighty. Listen, we've done some good work. A lot of things covered. Took a little while, but good detail. By acclamation, we call this meeting to a closure.
Great.
Look
See
forward to
everyone
seeing
tomorrow
you all
night.
tomorrow.
Thank you.